What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and Spider-Man's deadliest enemy is here in the Ultimate Universe now, and it's amazing. I love that Jonathan Hickman brought this guy back. So, picking up after the last video that we did, which was about a month ago, the long and short of it is that basically Harry Osborn's dead, and that what was revealed to Peter Parker from Kraven the Hunter is that they know his family. They know his name, they know his family's names, they know where he lives. And so Peter, after escaping Kraven the Hunter, came to the realization his family's got to go on the run until he can figure out what it is that they're going to do next. Because honestly, he's still kind of figuring out how to be a superhero. And there is no unified superhero community here the way there is in the main Marvel universe. So there's no Fantastic Four for him to go to. There's no Avengers team for him to assemble. It's largely just kind of Peter by himself out there in the world. And so this picks up with Peter Parker and Mary Jane just kind of out there in the middle of the desert, just kind of figuring out where things go. Now, one of the cool things about this, and one of the things I love about this, which I still think it's a terrible decision by Marvel not to have Peter and Mary Jane married in the main Marvel universe, she is very much his foundational rock, right? When you're in a relationship, you're a team, right? So the idea is that you pick up the slack of the other people. It's like Brene Brown said, right? One of you can give 10%, so the other person tries to give 90. And that's what Mary Jane Watson does here. That when Peter comes out and he's kind of caught up in the whole situation, right? The fact that he should be able to protect his family, he feels like he can't, that they're on the run. She's kind of this more voice of reason. And it's like, I mean, we're not really on the run, right? We're on vacation, right? You got to look at it with a more positive spin. But the important thing here is that we're safe. That's really what matters the most. And so long as we stay moving, we can stay safe. One of the things that I've always loved about Jonathan Hickman is how he writes characters as more human than superhero, if that makes any sense, right? I love the way that he does that, and it's phenomenal. Not only that, you end up finding out that Peter and MJ and his family and everything are, number one, in an RV, which just looks fun, and two, they're at like this giant RV park, and they end up meeting this guy, right? He was like, good morning, neighbors, beware strangers bearing gifts, and they're just kind of like, if you keep offering us coffee every morning, we're gonna start expecting it. Which is true, right? Do something nice for someone once, they'll love it. You do it twice, they'll appreciate it. You do it 3 times, they'll start to expect it. And so he's just kind of like, don't do that, right? That's exactly how the government gets you. So right off the bat, right, we just kind of find out that the people who are occupying this trailer park are somewhat on the fringe in varying ways. And so as the guy kind of introduces himself and talks to everybody, that MJ's like, yeah, this guy thinks he has X-ray goggles. And he's like, no. The people around here with working X-ray goggles are over on the back row. They'll deny it, but they have them. And Peter's like, which ones are those? Are they the UFO guys? And he says, the UFO guys are on our row. Back row is split between amateur filmmakers and foreign intelligence agents. The next row is anonymous, off-the-grid non-persons, and the row after that is retired stockbrokers. And then, of course, there's you, right? So again, kind of a hodgepodge of people, which is one of the cool things about road tripping. You meet all kinds of crazy folks and all kinds of interesting folks and all kinds of folks that you wish you could just get away from as fast as possible. But you meet all kinds of people out there when you go on road trips. But what this guy reveals to them is that up there in the mountains, right, nobody really knows what goes on up there, but there's all kinds of like crazy, kooky noises, that it's like an old abandoned military base, that it's not really a safe place, that people have gone up there and they've just disappeared. So it's almost like a bit of a scary story, right? And so Peter's like, okay, let's go take a look. And so at that point, you pick up with Richard. Now, Richard is getting this really amazing story arc in the Ultimate Spider-Man comic. Of course, he's the teenage son of Peter Parker, and he has the Venom symbiote. Now, again, just kind of a reminder here, for those of you guys who need a bit of a refresher, the Venom symbiote in the Ultimate Universe is not some alien technology or some living embodiment of the Black Abyss from Null the Symbiote God. As always, this Ultimate Universe is much like the original Ultimate Universe, where it's far more grounded in reality, and you would expect things to transpire the way they would if it happened in the real world. And so the Venom symbiote is actually technology that was essentially created by Tony Stark and was given to Peter Parker. So much like the original Ultimate Universe, the Venom symbiote is more a result of science than it is, crazy alien fantasy and all that kind of stuff. The other thing about this is that the symbiote suit was modeled after Peter Parker. So again, it's not inherently villainous. And one of the things that had always kind of thrown Peter off, especially when the suit bonded to his son, was whether or not the suit would be able to function in a capacity that would allow for advanced reasoning, right? Like as human beings, for example, we have nuance. Sometimes that's the source of hypocrisy, and sometimes it's the source of fantastic things, right? Like we have the ability to decide when to clean our house, but we never quite get around to it. You know what I mean? Like that sort of thing. And that's kind of the concern that he has, because when he's talking to his son, he's like, look, I'm still not sure about you having this Venom symbiote. And he's like, again, why is it a good idea to bring you along on this little adventure? And the response of his son is like the best response ever. He's like, well, because historically, team-ups are awesome, and people eat this father-son stuff up, especially the sons. And it's true. It's amazing. And that's where Peter's just kind of like, well, I mean, I love you, but like, I'm not really in this for sentimentality. It's not really what I'm going for here. I mean, you're important to me, but more so than any of that, my job is to keep you safe. And if you're running around in a Venom symbiote like this, number one, the situation makes it tough to keep you safe, and the symbiote suit makes it even harder because you stick out and you draw attention, that kind of thing. But again, he basically says, like, let's have a little bit of a chat. And that's where his son's like, I mean, that's what we're doing. And Peter says, I'm not talking to you, son. And the symbiote speaks and says, he's talking to me. Now, this is where Peter chimes in and says, let's go over a couple rules, right? There's a few things that I want to go over. And that's where the symbiote's like, I mean, I know, like, I'm not allowed to touch Mary Jane, that kind of thing. And he's like, no. Right? These are different rules, right? Those were rules that you had when you were basically duplicating me, right? When you were pretending to be me when I wasn't home. It's not something that Peter does very often, but it is a way for him to kind of go out and do his thing and still be there for the family in some capacity, albeit in a highly diminished state relative to the Peter Parker that they know and that they care about. And says, these rules are for when Richard is wearing you, right? When you're running around and that you guys are in dangerous situations. And Peter says, Richard told me how you've been practicing. How is that going? And Venom's like, I mean, I think it's going pretty well. And to a degree it is, right? One of the cool things about the relationship between Richard and Venom is Venom actually guides him on how to become a superhero. We could have taken that fight, Richard, but we needed to leave because you don't fully understand what you're capable of yet. And honestly, it was safer for you to go so we can kind of consolidate information and then figure out what the next step is, as opposed to Richard being a teenager and just wanting to kind of jump into the fray and fight everybody who he thinks needs to be fought and all that kind of stuff, right? When you're young and dumb, you're not really thinking rationally. And so Peter says, he also told me that you could take over if things got bad, or if he faces something that he's not ready for. And that's where Venom says, yes, I can, I will, and technically he has. And so Peter asks him the question, he says, so if you have to make a choice between saving me and saving him, you do know what to do, right? And Venom's just like, yes, Peter, because I'm modeled after you. If that ever happens, I need to save everyone, right? And Peter's like, no, that's not what I mean. And it's kind of a little gag, right? Because Venom's like, I know exactly what you mean. And Venom even asks him, like, would you ever let anything happen to your son? And Peter's like, you know I wouldn't. And Venom says, then of course I wouldn't either. And so that's going to be an important plot point going forward. How it's going to manifest, I don't know. But as you guys know who have read Jonathan Hickman and are huge fans of Jonathan Hickman, everything is important in some capacity. He may not revisit this for another 2 years, but he will revisit it, and it will become a very significant part of the story. And so that's where Richard's just like, I mean, can I just say, you guys are taking all the fun out of like this whole thing of like being a superhero? And like both Peter and Venom are like, no. I love that whole response. So finally they get to this military base, right? This great big huge base where there's this great big huge tower. Now, anybody who's familiar with the Spider-Man mythos, as soon as I said military base, you immediately knew what was coming. But here's the cool thing. When they get there, they go to take a closer look. And one of the things that Peter does in guiding Richard is he says, okay, this is your first lesson of the day. If you get a bad feeling about something, assume something is wrong, even if you don't see anything. And that's a really cool point. One of the best things about Peter Parker's spider sense is that it's kind of a reflection of our gut instincts, right? My gut is telling me there's something wrong, so there probably is, right? Humans have a kind of built-in fight or flight response. But in the middle of this, his spider sense goes off, and a giant sand hand goes to grab him. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, it's the Sandman. The Sandman's here. And the Sandman is arguably the most powerful villain that Spider-Man has. He's almost impossible to kill for Spider-Man or to even defeat. And in fact, there's an alternate reality story where Sandman kills Spider-Man by like flooding Spider-Man's insides with sand. So there's stories out there where like if he were just a little bit smarter, he could kill Peter like that and not think twice about it. Here's the kicker behind it, that there's a kind of device at work here. That tower is not just an arbitrary tower. It's actually a tower designed to keep him in that sand state, because it says entity consolidation detected, charging, and it basically emits a pulse right after 3 seconds, and it's designed to keep him from reverting back into his human form or to even look like anything other than just a giant pile of sand. But of course, the target of Sandman is this tower itself. But in being frustrated with the entire situation and honestly not being the sharpest tool in the shed, then he just starts like grabbing Peter and just starts beating him against this against this tower, which I guess it gets the job done. Peter's incredibly durable, so there's no reason that it shouldn't be able to work. But again, the tower charges up and it attacks him again, right? And it literally just kind of reverts him back into a kind of sand state. And it goes that way over and over and over again. And seemingly that's been happening this entire time. Those are the sounds that all these people out there are hearing, right? That's what that scary noise in the mountains is. And so while Peter constantly keeps getting grabbed by Sandman and constantly beaten against this tower, Richard starts to figure things out. He's like, okay, so if we turn that tower off, that means what exactly, right? And that's where Venom says the tower seems to be the only thing keeping the creature at bay. Every time it assumes a human form, it quickly reduces back to particles. And so that's where Richard's like, okay, so if we turn it off, then he'll be free. And that's where Venom chimes in with an important caveat here. He's like, yes, that's true, Richard, but what would he be free to do if he can just kind of go back into his normal form? And Richard's immediate thought here is Spider-Man. And that's the inexperience of Richard, right? That he gets kind of caught up emotionally in the situation. Instead of thinking of the full totality of what would happen if he let his father go and any other potential options, he's so hyper-focused on saving his dad that nothing else really seems to matter that much. Now, it is a testament to how much he loves his father, but again, it's also a testament to his inexperience and a testament to his inability to think beyond how he feels in the moment. And so ultimately, he basically hits the tower and the tower shuts down. And when that happens, Sandman reverts back into his human form. Now, here's the part that isn't told to us, but I would go so far as to say that there's a whole motivation behind this that involves the Maker. Because what goes on here is he kind of tells his story to a degree. It's not overly complex, but he was like, like once he starts going back to a human form, he starts crying. And he was like, you, like me speaking to you right now, are the first words that I've been able to say in almost 3 years. Now, that 3-year window is coincidentally when the Maker first started making his move after arriving here and kind of screwing everything up. And so what happens is he says, I was just a normal guy who got too curious. They caught me after I cut through the fence and snuck into the base. I knew someone was doing illegal experiments here, but I never thought they would make me into one. But they did. I became someone who could be Earth. But after they saw what I had become, they built the tower to keep me from reforming and regaining my human form. Then they left, leaving me that way, trapped and hopeless. Now, here's one of the things to know, and what's really not being explained here. When the Maker arrived in this universe as a guy who can manipulate time, this evil version of Reed Richards knew how this universe started, and he knew how the universe would end. He had knowledge of all things across space and time in this reality. So he knew what the story of Sandman was supposed to become. But the Maker is always doing things, and had always been doing things, to either prevent superheroes from coming into existence, modifying the origins of traditional superheroes, hence the reason why Peter Parker did not become Spider-Man until he was an adult, as opposed to it happening when he was a teenager. All these little things here and there. What's interesting about that, though, is you could actually make an argument the Maker did Peter a favor, because if Peter Parker's not Spider-Man as a teenager, he's not reckless. And if he's not reckless, he doesn't lose Uncle Ben, and he doesn't lose Gwen Stacy, although him and Gwen never really seemed to get together in the first place. So you can make an argument the Maker's the reason why Peter Parker still has Uncle Ben. But as this story's told, Sandman does not appear to be a traditional villain. But even then, there will likely be a moment when he will come back and you will see the full totality of his powers. And he'll go nuts, because what happens before we get to that point is you switch to Peter as he jumps back over and basically calls Uncle Ben. Now, this is all off the radar, right? This is him borrowing somebody else's phone, and he's got like 5 minutes to talk. And the conversation between the two is one where it's very innocuous. Not even J. Jonah Jameson knows what they're talking about. Because as this conversation unfolds, it's Peter Parker asking him questions, are you safe? And how's everybody doing? Do I need to come home? And it's Uncle Ben responding as if he's talking to an insurance salesman, right? No, I don't need insurance. It's like, well, how are you doing, Uncle Ben? Well, my health is okay. And everybody else around me, their health seems to be pretty good. That kind of conversation, right? And so once the conversation ends pretty quickly, right? Again, doesn't last that long, that they hang up and the story switches to Ben, specifically in the presence of Kingpin and James Wesley. Now, James Wesley is the personal assistant of Wilson Fisk in the Ultimate Universe. And Kingpin, even though he is a servant of the Illuminati, so the Incredible Hulk and those guys who were basically assembled by the Maker and control everything behind the scenes for their own nefarious purposes, Wilson Fisk still operates as you would expect the Kingpin to operate in Marvel Comics. What's so interesting about this is a follow-up to Ultimate Spider-Man number 10, which is to say, in that story, that Ben Urich and J. Jonah Jameson, after leaving the Daily Bugle, finding funding from Harry Osborn's wife, basically Oscorp, and then using that funding to launch their own newspaper, started to realize that there's something going on here, right? That what had happened is that James Wesley, as the assistant to Wilson Fisk, had organized the sale of Stark Stane, the company that belonged to Howard Stark and Obadiah Stane, and has essentially been defunct since the original formation of the Ultimate Universe, as Jonathan Hickman has written it. Somebody sold it off, right? Wilson Fisk made it possible for it to be sold. Somebody bought it. It was sold to a shell company, which was sold to a shell company, and on and on and on. So no one knows who truly controls this. And then at the very end, Oscorp bought it. And so what it seemed like is Wilson Fisk had organized the sale of Stark Stane to some kind of shadow subsidiary. It was broken into pieces, and Oscorp owns one of those pieces. Now, the initial concern of Harry Osborn's wife in Ultimate Spider-Man 10, and the concern of Harry Osborn himself before he was killed, was that Ben Urich and J. Jonah Jameson had figured out that Harry was the Green Goblin. But that's not really what they were hunting for. What they were hunting for and trying to figure out is that if Wilson Fisk is doing all of this and then selling Stark Stane to some other company, he's doing it against his will. Otherwise, he would have just purchased it for himself and then just kept all the money that the company was making. And so that means someone out there is controlling Kingpin, and that's the person they were trying to find. Now, they initially confronted James Wesley about this, and James had essentially told them, right, in no uncertain terms, you're going down a rabbit hole and you are digging up some very, very bad things. What Wilson Fisk and James didn't know was that within Stark Stane's company, hidden way down in the bottom, right in the belly of that company, was years of information that had been put together on Wilson Fisk and even on this, kind of hidden Illuminati hand. That information was given to Ben Urich and J. Jonah Jameson by Harry Osborn. That's kind of been the background story that's been following the idea of Ben and J. Jonah Jameson all throughout the Ultimate Spider-Man run so far. And so ultimately, they published an article in their newspaper revealing all this information. But Uncle Ben didn't sign his name to it. Instead, he used the name Ben Reilly. And the way that he had always done interviews when he was asking people about this, one of our reporters out there in the field is doing this, putting on this guise that it wasn't him doing it, it was just some nameless reporter out there, because he knew that if he did sign his name to it, folks would come looking for him. And so that's when he's confronted by James and Kingpin. And James gives them a piece of paper, and they're like, what in the world is this, right? And he says, tomorrow, the Daily Bugle is running a story about the reckless owner and operators of your newspaper, right? Basically you guys, but no one knows it's you guys. And he says, I'm here on their behalf to see if you wanted to make a comment. And they're like, what did you do? And James says, what you are looking at here are various well-sourced police and forensic reports confirming the deaths and murders of a not so insignificant number of people who all happen to share the same name, Ben Reilly. So the real question is, what did you do? And the question's asked by Jameson, you really killed every Ben Reilly in New York? And the response of Kingpin is just like, goodness no. right? I belong to a global organization. My God, give me more credit. We killed every Ben Reilly on the planet. And that's where it's just like, why would you do that? And Kingpin's like, you write a story and you think you're changing the world. You tell the truth and you think it matters. It does not. And where Jameson just kind of like, so you did all this what? To like educate us? Or are you just here to put an end to our entire practice? And the response of Kingpin is not what you would expect. He says, I just wanted you to know that I'm an admirer of your work. I know it was you. It's not some mystery reporter out there who wrote this article for your paper. No, it was you. You signed your name to it. And I'm here to make a point, right? I killed every Ben Reilly out there. I could kill you anytime I want. At any point. It doesn't matter. I can kill you in your sleep. I can kill you when you're walking out to the car and you'll be dead before you heard the sound that killed you. I can do anything I want. There's nothing you can do to stop me. I killed every Ben Reilly on the face of the planet. Do you hear police sirens? Do you see handcuffs around my arms? No. I'm standing here in front of you telling you that I did it. So what could you possibly do to stop me? And what could I possibly do to stop you? It's this phenomenal moment, right? This huge reveal. He's like, strong words, they elicit a strong response. And what's really awesome about this, and it's one of the reasons why I love the way that Jonathan Hickman writes J. Jonah Jameson and Uncle Ben. I may have called him Ben Urich, right? But I love the way he writes Uncle Ben, as he says, what's this supposed to be, right? Like, what are you hoping to accomplish here? Are you hoping to make us quit? I mean, you've already killed everybody. You know, and that's where Jameson's like, I mean, it's not going to happen, right? Our job is to report the truth. And we knew when we got into this that we were putting our lives on the line when we were publishing an article involving arguably one of the most powerful men in the criminal world. But if you really think that killing every guy out there named Ben Reilly is going to somehow intimidate us into stopping, well, you got another thing coming. And that's where Kingpin's like, good, I don't want you to stop. Right? And it takes him by surprise, right? Literally, Uncle Ben's just like, what? And he's like, you give me something to point to pick apart, to reframe, to ridicule, to further our plans. I want you to keep going. You're a useful tool to separate us from them. And the questions asked by J. Jonah Jameson, like your plans, like what are you talking about? I hear that if you want to hear God laugh, tell them all about your plans. And that's where Kingpin reveals why the paper of Uncle Ben and J. Jonah Jameson is so useful. He says, here's what you don't know. As far as you're concerned, I work for God, and what you call night, that is his hand casting a shadow over the earth itself. So please continue what you're doing. Be a useful distraction, but stop hiding behind others. You'll just get the wrong people hurt. Now, the bigger point that he's making here is this. No one cares what they have to say. The universe is in a relatively rough place. People are out there living their lives. And while we're not really given the political makeup of how people in this world function, the fact is that different people read different newspapers for various reasons. You have fans of the Daily Bugle, you have fans of this one. And so what this does with them coming along and saying, you guys won't believe what the Kingpin's doing, it forces everybody's attention onto what the Kingpin's doing. Make a lot of noise over here so no one notices what's going on over there. Now, it's not the intention of Uncle Ben and J. Jonah Jameson to basically be a tool to be used by the Kingpin in order to draw everyone's attention away from what the Illuminati's actually doing. It just happens to work out that way. And that's where the situation becomes a little strained and a little difficult. Because if you're a newspaper like this, and you know you're being used as a distraction for the general public to stop focusing on what's really going on, what do? Do you stick with the truth? You keep publishing that information because the world needs to know, even though you know people don't care, but journalism is ideally about the pursuit of truth? Or do you stop publishing your stories? Do you shut your paper down and hope people just realize what's happening over there, that they've been distracted from the entire time, knowing that even if they learn about it, there's two possibilities. Number one, they won't care. And number two, even if they did, there's nothing they can do about it. What do you do in that kind of situation? It's not an easy answer. And this is why Hickman is amazing. He's one of the best writers in the history of the entire comic book world. Because what happens here is Wesley is just like, okay, so I mean, do you care to make a comment? For the record, and they essentially send him away. But this is where you get some incredible foreshadowing here, right? This is Jonathan Hickman saying, yeah, man, Uncle Ben's gonna die. Because what Uncle Ben does is he says, sure, right? When all this is done, when wrongs have been righted and the shadow is lifted, I'm the guy who's going to write the obituary. And you can quote me on that. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Jonathan Hickman just told us that Uncle Ben is likely gonna get one to the dome piece. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you think down in the comments, and I will catch you all later. Peace.